Hello and welcome to Inside the Senate, your window into Nigeria's lawmaking chamber and the decisions shaping our daily lives.
And those in support say aye, those against say nay. The ayes have it. The clerk of the Senate.
I am Muhammad Kudu Abubakar, and on this episode, we take you inside the storm that was the second quarter of 2025. That is April to June 2025, a period the Senate became the center of national debate.
And we all know that agriculture is the mainstay of our economy. Therefore, what we do, we need to strengthen agriculture in our country. First of all, for the sake of food security. Number two, for the sake of raw material for our industries. Number three, for export. These are very, very important areas that we need to strengthen through agriculture. Therefore, we need to prepare and have good personnel to man agriculture in this country, to drive the process of our agricultural initiative in this country. And how do we do that? It's through this kind of institution where we train the manpower that will be engaged in modern agricultural practices. Because the world has changed. The world is dynamic. So also agriculture practice has changed. Science has been brought into it. More innovations, more better ways of producing food have been created. And you cannot get that done without training the personnel to go in line, in tandem with the current realities in agriculture in the whole world. And not even that, to add to it, the area where this institution will be sited is Daros, where most of the people there are farmers.
We need to promote food security in Nigeria. If we fail to do that, we know that the hungry man is an angry man. We want to solve the problems of insecurity in Nigeria, we must be able to feed well and remain happy. And so I want to give my full support to the establishment of this university in Bauchi State. I want to also urge my colleagues to support this bill so that we'll be able to have enough institutions for our children, our youths to attend. A situation where many students have found themselves outside the countries because they don't have no placements in Nigeria to go to school. And that itself encourages capital flight.
There is an adage to the effect that any society that toys with the education of its citizens does so at the risk of its own peril. So as a result of this, we cannot afford to relegate anything concerning education to the background, and especially agricultural education, against the backdrop of the fact that agriculture accounts for 70% of our employment and 40% of our GDP. So such an important sector, we cannot afford to relegate it to the background. By creating this university, it will serve the purpose of training the requisite manpower in various sectors of agriculture, aquaculture, horticulture, and what have you, in order for us to achieve not only food security, but have enough to export with a view to earning the much needed foreign exchange to deploy to our infrastructure needs.
On May 6, 2025, after a 5-week recess for Easter and Eid al-Fitr celebrations, the Senate resumed plenary, but there was no time for pleasantries. Nigeria's economy was burning and citizens were restless.
Our economy has a very high potential and requires high-level technical, scientific, and administrative skill to drive it.
On that first day, lawmakers debated new bills, among them amendments to the Federal Medical Centers Act, changes to coastal shipping regulations, and proposals for new institutions like the National Institute of Irrigation and a Maritime Trust Fund.
Considering the fact of agricultural nature of this country, and if you look at the country-to-country agreement, if this bill is established and supported, the export-oriented economy of this country will improve. That is where we have a lot of challenges, and we need to support this bill so that we can be able to make our export-oriented, to make our foreign reserve, and also make our industries workable, and also support the economic growth of this country.
Now, to the ordinary Nigerian, these may sound like technical exercises, but pause and think. Irrigation means food security. Maritime trust funds mean revenue from shipping. Armed forces trust funds mean more money for soldiers in a country battling insecurity. The message was clear.
One of the reasons why we suffer what we suffer is today as it is, we stand as a consumer nation. And what will take us out of that enclave is to be a producer nation. And how do you produce? You produce to export to the rest of the world. And so for our local producers that do not have the requisite financial capacity to embark on exportation, strengthening Exim Bank will capacitate it to be able to support these producers for export. And the more we export, the more foreign currency we earn, and the more we earn, the deeper our foreign reserve becomes, and that strengthens our local currency. So it is a bill that needs to be supported by all.
The Senate wanted to show it was responding to Nigeria's urgent crisis in health, in food production, and in national security. But it was in June that the Senate made history. On June 26th, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu signed into law 4 sweeping pieces of legislation, all driven by the Senate.
President of Nigeria set up this Presidential Task Force Committee to review our tax law and fiscal landscape. They've worked for over 1 year, and the output of their work is what it is before the distinguished senator as the 4th tax bill.
Together, they formed Nigeria's most ambitious tax reform in decades. The Nigeria Tax Act, the Nigeria Revenue Service Act, the Tax Administration Act, and the Joint Revenue Board Act. Big names, yes, but what do they mean for you?
Distinguished colleagues, a bill for an act to repeal certain acts on taxation and enact the Nigeria Tax Bill to provide for taxation of income, transactions, and instruments, and for later matters 2025, third reading taken and passed. Let me once again thank my colleagues, and it has been a very rewarding week.
Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues, what is left on my part really is to most respectfully thank our colleagues for the wonderful job they have done.
The tax laws that we have enacted today, when signed, will bring more revenue to the nation, will bring justice to all, and will enable us to have more development and leave a good legacy on taxation for the future generation of Nigeria.
Those in favor that this bill be read a second time, please say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it.
First, the acts consolidated over a dozen outdated tax laws. Second, they created the Joint Revenue Board, a powerful new agency to harmonize tax administration across the federal, states, and local governments.
I want to emphasize that between our second reading of this bill and today, we had different engagements with different stakeholders, ranging from the executive arm of government, and people in charge of the Presidential Task Force, to members of civil society and professional organizations, some of whom took part in our public hearing. There have been series of meetings, there have been series of engagement. Even as a Senate, we set up our own committee, seasoned senators who had engaged in various aspects of public life. Some had served as governors, some served as permanent secretaries. Let it also be said that we chose not to grandstand on this. The times are unusual for our country and for the global economy. As a parliament, we must do everything possible to cooperate with other arms of government to ensure that we are able to give impetus and the legal framework. We believe that we have done what we did in the last 6 months in overriding public interest, and we are willing to do more.
For the first time, Nigeria now has a central national taxpayer database. But here is the sting. At a time when fuel prices had soared to about 1,000 naira per litre and inflation was at record highs, these reforms raised fears of heavier burdens on households already gasping for breath. For the Senate, this was a delicate balancing act. The reforms promised long-term stability, but they risked short-term pains.
It is our responsibility to bring in to the federal government's coffers all the funds that are due to the people of Nigeria. We need cooperation, we need enforcement, because there's federal government money lying outside the TSA, lying outside of Central Bank, and it is our determination to make sure we reel in every single penny. And it requires, to an extent, an elite consensus. It requires people to do the right thing. But with technology, even if they won't, we will see it and we will make them do the right thing in favor of Nigerians.
Hot on the heels of tax reform came another thunderbolt: the approval of an external borrowing plan worth more than $21 billion, which the government said will build railways, power projects, farms, and security infrastructure. One highlight was the Eastern Rail Corridor, a multi-billion-dollar promise to link key parts of the country.
This Senate approved the President's request for approval for the borrowing plan for 2025-2026 and going forward. In that request, Mr. President, one critical thing that I've always canvassed for in this Senate, with motions upon motions, was the need to reconstruct the Eastern Rail Line by the federal government of Nigeria. I recall that in one occasion, 35 senators in this chamber co-sponsored one of such motions. And Mr. President, in each occasion, you have always expressed the need to consider the motion and the prayers. And the prayers have always been approved. Mr. President, I also recall that in 2025, when the President submitted his budget proposals to this Senate, during the second reading of that budget, I raised an observation that the Eastern Rail Line was not included in the legacy projects that the President will execute. I recall that the DSP presiding that they told me to wait for the breakdown. And when the breakdown is released, that I can now make a case. Well, the budget was discussed and referred to the committee. On the day the budget was to be passed, during the closed-door session, I raised the same issue, that the Eastern Rail Line was not accommodated in the 2025 budget. You magnanimously approved that I should raise it when we reverted to plenary, that even though it was for the budget to be passed, which will not allow for any debate, they would like me to raise the same issue. I did during the plenary by magnanimity, and you sitting there promised that there was merit in that agitation or in that observation. You promised that you will take it up with Mr. President along with the leadership so that this Eastern Rail Line will be addressed once and for all. I was just for happy, Mr. President, that when the request for $21 billion loan was submitted to the Senate, the Eastern Rail Line was now adopted. $3 billion was provided for the reconstruction of the Eastern Rail Line. And yesterday, the Senate, during the session, approved the request. It now paves way for that Eastern Rail Line to be reconstructed. I feel so happy about this because I've always canvassed here that anything we shall do in Nigeria, we should carry parts of Nigeria along. This Eastern Rail Line that has now the prospect of being reconstructed will be a very good development, particularly in line with the sentiments of the people of the Southeast Zone. So on this note, I want to thank Mr. President, who has promised that he will do this. During his visit to the Southeast in January 4th precisely, our stakeholders raised the same issue with him, and he promised that he will address it. So in keeping with this promise, this cry of the people of this zone, and indeed all the users of the Eastern Rail Corridor, starting from to Maiduguri, including Bauchi, everywhere, they are now happy that this is going to be done. So on this note, I thank Mr. President, and also thank you, Mr. Senate President, for joining me in leading this struggle on behalf of the people using this corridor. Thank you very much, and may God bless you.
And then came the most heated question of all. What happened to the savings from subsidy removal? Finance Minister Wale Edun was summoned. He requested a closed-door session that may have raised eyebrows because Nigerians wanted answers in the open.
So what are the solutions? Number one, macroeconomic reform. Reform your economies. Number two, increase your tax to GDP. We heard today that the Nigerian tax to GDP ratio is currently of the order of, has improved to about 13% of GDP. In the developing world, in the developed countries, it's 60%. That's when the government has enough money to invest in infrastructure, health, education, the basics that provide an economic platform for hopefully growth and development. The third thing was that we should apply technology to our revenue effort. We should apply technology, automation, digitization, and AI to government's finances in order to get the extra efficiency that would lead to improved revenues from that source and increase revenue as a percentage of GDP. And finally, that we needed to crowd in the private sector. We needed to put in place the economic environment, the fiscal environment, and the overall investment climate that would attract private investment. If you look carefully, those are exactly what is happening in Nigeria at present. Macroeconomic reform, improved tax reform, application of technology to the revenue effort, and crowding in the private sector through PPPs, through improving incentive framework. So if we have come that far, it's important that together we look for those last pieces of the jigsaw puzzle that will not just allow us to have what we have now, which is an element of stabilization, but that we kick on from there and get the momentum to grow the economy, increase productivity, create jobs, and move millions and millions of Nigerians out of poverty, which in fact is the overall aim and objective of the government's renewed hope agenda. Let me turn to the reform program. It is a three-stage reform process, and let's look at its macroeconomic outcomes. The purpose of our reform journey is to break the cycle of macroeconomic instability that has historically, as we all know, undermined growth. The vulnerability, the challenges of the past, vulnerability to external shocks, especially, of course, the oil price fluctuations, fiscal and external imbalances, high food and energy costs, high cost of living, high inflation, and a weak investment environment, and a shortage of globally competitive labor. In response to that, there has been, as we all know, and we heard earlier, and we've heard throughout the day, market correction. The key prices, the price of market pricing of petroleum products, market pricing of foreign exchange as the key prices in the economy to restore competitiveness and, of course, attract investment. And then following on from that, macroeconomic stability, anchoring inflation. We heard this morning that the key, the number one target of macroeconomic policy must be to fight inflation, because once you have inflation not under control, the poorest and the most vulnerable suffer the most, and even others that are able to perhaps resist and pass on some of these costs, they too do not have an environment in which they can plan for investment. And the ultimate aim is inclusive, rapid economic growth to move millions out of poverty. Our outcomes, and I think we do have to be guided by the data. By Q2, the economy was growing over 4% per annum. And I think many were surprised by that and felt that it was a real inflection point. And in particular, because the target overall is to get to about 7% per annum growth, because that will be more than double population growth, and you know people are being lifted out of poverty. We all know without rapid growth, you cannot reduce poverty. But the important and interesting fact is that industrial growth, industrial output that creates jobs, was actually growing over 7% over that target. So even though the economy as a whole was not giving us 7% per annum growth, we can see the direction, we can see indications that we can reach that level of growth. So that's a very important indicator that we're going in the right direction, I would put it.
Markets were still in chaos, food prices rising daily, transport unaffordable, inflation unrelenting. In such a climate, the Senate's credibility depended not just on passing laws, but on proving it could hold the executive accountable. The grilling of Minister Edu was therefore symbolic. So what did the second quarter of the year tell us about Nigeria's Senate? It showed ambition, passing historic tax reforms and approving a massive borrowing plan. But it also revealed contradictions, supporting government policies while questioning their outcomes. For millions of Nigerians, the question remains, will these laws put food on the table or just more strain on their pockets? I'm Muhammad Kuda Abubakar. Thanks for watching.